All right, we are live. So I'm glad that we are here tonight. We don't have any viewers quite yet, so I'm going to wait until a viewer pops up. Although actually this is parts on YouTube, so anyone who's rewatching it is already seeing this. We're going to go ahead and start. Despite a few technical difficulties and a few people who are running late to our chat tonight that we're hoping will be able to join us. But if you are watching on YouTube or if you're watching via Google Hangout, thank you for joining us tonight. This is our second parenting chat using Kristen Welch's book, Raising Grateful Kids in an Entitled World. And I shared last week, if you were able to jump on, that this kind of stumbled across my Twitter feed as 7 ways to stop complaining under your roof, and that seemed like something that I really wanted to do, and that led me to this book that Kristen Welch just put out. And I think it's an incredibly relevant conversation, and wanted to have an opportunity to just discuss some of the ideas. So if you're tuning in with us tonight, on the left side of your screen, if you scroll over there, you'll see a Q&A, and you can hit that and an app will open in the right-hand sidebar. And so as we're having this conversation tonight, if you have questions or comments that you want to add to this discussion, you can type those things there, and I'll be able to see those and insert those in the conversation. And then at the end of our time tonight, we'll have a little bit more of that Q&A, but you can be typing those in the whole time. But thank you so much for joining us. And again, I'm Jen Williams, and I am not a parenting expert. I am just a parent of 2 boys. My husband and I parent 2 boys, ages 7 and 4, Jake and I almost said Jake and Clark's my husband. They are Jacob and Bryant. So last week, I introduced some of the others who were joining us. Tonight, I'm going to put you guys on the spot early, and I have 2 of my favorite people that I feel like I'm finishing through life with that are with us. And so I'm going to invite all of them and welcome Marcia to introduce themselves, and if y'all would just share a little bit about your stage of parenting and where your kids are, and maybe just a little bit about your family dynamic, where you are, what you do. So Laura, I'll put you on the spot first because you're my sister and I can. So tell them who you are.
Sure, my name is Laura. My family resides in the great state of Ohio. And in our house, we are trying our best, our very best, to prayerfully raise 2 girls and a boy, along with a dog who is just as challenging as the children at times. We have a 12-year-old girl, so we're doing the preteen horrifying thing, a 9-year-old boy who has some interesting, he is fun and funny and has anger issues, so he's lots of fun. And we have an 8-year-old little girl named Ruthie who is going on to the bright age of 27 very quickly and acts like it. So she brings her own set of challenges. And then we have a dog who's really just very overly cuddly and wants too much love for any dog, and is a problem. So all 4 of our children, including the fur dog, have their own unique challenges. But we still try to do our best to get through the day without completely screaming at each other to end the day at least. And I think our dynamic is kind of crazy. We're both working parents, and we're always running around, so we live off of spreadsheets and calendars and various apps that tell us where to be when and how not to screw everything up. So that's us.
That's awesome, and I can attest to all of their spreadsheets. They're very organized, and what you can't see off to her right shoulder is a really cool chalkboard wall where they keep their life organized from week to week, and I'm going to steal that concept really, really soon. So thanks for being on, Laura. Marcia, how about you tell us about your family and your people and where you are?
Okay. Hi, I'm Marcia Johnson, and we recently transplanted ourselves from Michigan, where we knew everyone and had a great circle of people, and decided that we would start over, which is insane. So our kids are doing well. They seem to have adjusted, and they like life. And let's see, Laura did such a good job. Emmett is 11 and a half. Gretchen is 9 and a half. I think she and Ruthie might be related. no joke. There was one time, and Jen, you know this story because it was to you, and I said that I was nervous that Emmett is so strong-willed and such a leader that I said, you know, we're safe with him. We know that he'll be strong and not given to peer pressure, and he helps set the tone, and people follow him. And our problem with Gretchen is people follow her too, but she will be the one that gets people into drugs. She will be the drug dealer. She might be a drug dealer someday. She'll be really good at it. So, yeah, we have our 2 kids. We moved here because of my husband's job. He's an engineer. We also have a small business that I run from home. I'm supposed to be part-time, but it doesn't feel part-time anymore. We have an intern who also works part-time for the Ashton Ridge Church, and he now lives with us too, because that was a good idea. So he lives with us. He doesn't really have a lot of experience with kids or with a 7-month-old puppy and a 4-year-old blind dog, but now he does. So he's in our house, and we just try to make the best of every day. And like Laura said, we try to get to the end of the day without killing anyone. I try to drink as much as I can without being intoxicated. And that's it.
We love you. We love you for all of your honesty, Marcia. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shara, let me call on you. Shara, tell us more about who you are and where you are.
Hi, I'm Shara. I also live in South Carolina in the Somerville area, and I have 3 kids. The oldest one is Jana, and she is 7, almost 7.5 now, and she's headed to 2nd grade in the fall. She is very much a first child, very intelligent, very sassy, very independent, so that's fun to hang out with all the time. My middle daughter is Millie, and she is 4, almost 5 in August, and she's headed to kindergarten in the fall. And I'm looking forward to her being in school full time. And then she's our middle child. She's a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a spitfire, and she keeps me on my toes. And then we have little Lincoln, who's our charmer. He is turning 2 on Sunday, and he is just our baby boy. He's my saving grace most of the time. So I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I work part-time, very part-time, blogging on palmettosandpigtails.com, and I run a small Etsy sewing shop too, where I make baby stuff. So I'm around most of the time.
Shara is very creative and makes all the things that you see on Pinterest that I can't make at all, and does lots of cool stuff for her kids. So great to have you on tonight, Shara. And I see that Mary Ellen Piper was able to jump on with us. We're so glad. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. I'm just asking everyone to share who you are, where you are, and kind of where you are with parenting and your kids. So tell us a little bit about you, Mary Ellen.
Great. Yeah. We're calling in from Pennsylvania, and we have a 5.5-year-old, a 17-month-old, and I'm due in about a month with number 3. So we both work, we're both physicians, and technically I'm full-time, but I have this sort of regular schedule, nothing too crazy, so that's kind of good. I was part-time recently, but then kind of took this promotion where I'm full-time, so that's a new juggle for us. We have not read the book yet, but we bought it right after your last hangout because we watched it and we thought, oh, that's definitely something we are really struggling with, you know, and we're trying really hard, but we're struggling, and just don't feel like we know very many people who are actually kind of on that quest, so we're really intrigued by this group of people who sound like they maybe are in a similar place to us with wanting to do better, knowing that we're called to do better, that we have to hold these guys, we have to do a good job with these little guys. We're just not totally sure how to do it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight,
Thanks for having me.
all of you. I'm thrilled to have you, and we may have a few more that jump in as we go. But I think, like Mary Ellen just said, it's such an important conversation because it doesn't necessarily feel like the same conversation that everyone in our culture is having in terms of figuring out how are we raising our kids and what do we ultimately want the most for our kids. And so I do want to dive right in there tonight. We're going to hit 3 big areas, but I want to start by throwing out, I've already made all of you talk once, but I want to throw out a fill-in-the-blank question for each of you as we get started tonight, and it goes like this. What I want most for my kids is fill in the blank. So whoever wants to go first, as it pops into your head, how would you end that sentence? What I want most for my kids is?
Them not to live in my basement. Is that the right answer?
That's good. It's good.
Okay, that's my comedic answer. I'll break the ice with a little more serious one since I went comedy first. But I think what I want most for my kids is to know that they leave our house followers of Jesus, and then what happens, happens, baby.
Yep.
That's all I have to say. You look like you want more. I'm out. That's it.
No, that's huge. I didn't want to interrupt in case there was, but I think that's so foundational. Our ability to say all the other things that feel like they jump in there, but at the end of the day, we want them to be followers of Jesus, wanting our kids to love the Lord. So that's a good answer. So some of you I know you're going to default because she stole the Trump answer. So, but add to that a little bit.
Always go first.
Add to that a little bit. What is it? What do we want? What do we want most for our kids?
I'll go next. A long time ago, I went to a prayer retreat where it was just me. I was by myself, which I hate, and so I had to write all weekend about things. And this was actually one of the things, was to spend part of the day praying over your kids and what you wanted for them and what your vision was for them. So I remember writing unshakable spirits and courageous faith. But then the problem was, because I thought those words sounded so cool, but then what I struggled with is, how do you get those things? Like, you get faith because of what you've gone through, and you have a closer relationship with people because of what you've gone through, or a closer relationship with Jesus because of what you've gone through. And then I just prayed that my kids have an unshakable spirit and courageous faith. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, do you understand that means, like, with that comes hardship and trial and tribulation, and I actually don't want hardship and trial and tribulation for my kids. Like, I want life to be really easy for them and for everything to go perfectly, but it's not going to. So I guess out of what I know is going to happen, that would be my prayer, that they are so courageous in their faith and that they have an unshakable spirit regardless of what happens. And not so much that they're dealing drugs, unshakable spirit, but that they can't be swayed.
No, that's really good, and I want everybody put a pin in what Marcia was just talking about, because that's actually one of the big pieces that we're going to spend tonight's conversation on. And I don't want to go there quite yet. I know gold star for Marcia, because where we're going next in this conversation is how do we make room in our families and in our parenting for struggles and for doubt and even for failure, knowing how that shapes. And so put a pin in that in terms of wanting that unshakable spirit is a really great way to say that. And if I'd add to that, and Mary Ellen and Shara, y'all keep thinking because I'm not going away from our fill in the blank yet, but I was reading an article recently that talked about scientifically 13 things that parents of successful adults have in common. And one of the things that showed up on that list was grit. And I actually think that grit is probably a synonym for what you were just talking about, Marcia, that whole idea that we would raise kids who have the ability to go through things but continue to get back up, to understand that they don't have to get everything right the first time, the understanding that they can experience difficult things and find their way through. in life. And so I think that's really good. And for affirmation, one of the 13 things that will apparently lead to successful children, apparently, according to science. So before I move on, though, let me jump back, though, to this question, Sharon, Mary Ellen, if you have any thoughts on what do we want most for our kids?
Well, one of the things I know we want is I want them to find what, of course, to be good disciples and followers of Jesus, but to really find what God made them uniquely kind of special for, and to not get in their way by doing too many things for them. And some of these entitlement kind of topics, I think, weave into that. Because we try to clear the path so much that we don't let them learn how to work hard. I want them to have a good work ethic, and I want them to be adventurous, and that's what I think the last lady was talking about. I want them to have that brave spirit, and I don't know exactly how to cultivate that all the time, but also to be very kind and empathic and all of that too.
Yeah, it's not one thing. I mean, I love that I gave you all the fill in the blank as if it's one word, and it's really not. It's a lot of those things. It's a lot of those pieces. And I noticed that Michael joined us as you were talking. So welcome, Michael. That's Mary Ellen's husband. So Michael, Mary Ellen already did a good job introducing you. So we're glad to have you in the conversation as well. We need some dad perspectives, and I think we may get James here too a little bit later. As we go. So, but Shara, before I jump on, how would you complete that sentence? What I want most for my kids is?
All of the above. I feel like everybody did a great job of saying exactly what I was thinking too. I think the only thing that I would add is I don't even know how to put this into words, but I feel like one of the things that we struggle with in my house is I'm an ex-teacher. I feel like and so I job of saying exactly what I would. I'm an ex-teacher, and so I am very bad about making every how to put this into words, but into like a teachable moment. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I want them to be able to discover their faith on their own without me like shoving it down their throats. Do you know what I mean? As well as just like general like kindness and empathy and everything like Mary Ellen was saying. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, I guess because my kids are little, like I'm just constantly being like, oh, you should say you're sorry because of this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm kind of to the stage now, and maybe it's just after 3 kids, or maybe it's because my oldest one has been in school for a couple years or whatever, that I get really annoyed like having to say all that stuff to them over and over and over again. And so I guess for me, like the biggest thing is I want them to have a happy heart about everything, and like really like, I don't know, really feel all these emotions and everything for themselves, and not just because I'm telling them to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're talking about, in some ways, the trick of how do we raise independent thinkers who we also really hope think like us. Not to put words into your mouth, but, I know for me, I want my kids to have a faith that's their own. I want them to have that grit that we talked about and stand strong. And, but at the same time, I'd like to put all of those things in them in exactly the way that I see them. And that's so hard as
and
parents.
Right now.
Right. If you can get that now at the ages of 4 and 7, if you could grasp that concept, that would be really great. That would be really great. Well, Nancy has joined us as well tonight. Thank you for joining us, Nancy. I know that we threw you a curveball early on, but I'm really glad that you were able to join us. As we were starting, Nancy, I asked everybody to introduce themselves, and we're going to go forward in the conversation, but I really do want people to hear from you as well. And so if you could just tell us really quickly who you are, where you are, and where you are in your parenting journey in terms of kids' ages. And
yeah, I'm Nancy Trawick. I'm here in Somerville with several of y'all, but I'm married to Brandon, who is not here, which was not helping tonight with the parenting process. I have a newly 6-year-old and a brand new 3-year-old as of today, so we've been birthday celebrating. Yeah, 3 and 6. One's going to public kindergarten next year, which will be great, and my sassy, very sassy 3-year-old will be back at preschool next year. So.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Nancy. And Nancy and her husband are also about to start in the adventure of foster parenting. Yes. So our prayers are with them, and really a great way to parent and another additional parenting challenge. So Nancy can lead a future session on that for all of us. How do we parent all of our people plus extra people along the way? So, but thank you all. So, okay, so getting to that, back to that question, what do we want most for our kids? And you guys really did such a good job. It's like you read my Cliff Notes and knew where we were heading tonight, because one of the things that consistently came up was that idea of we want kids who can handle life. And knowing that to handle life, they need Jesus. And so we want them to have Jesus, and we want them to understand that for themselves. And we want them to be able to take life in all the ways it comes. And one of the things that's central to that is the fact that life is not easy. Life is hard. And try as we may, we will never keep our kids from experiencing challenges, from experiencing hardships, from experiencing letdowns. And I think one of the things she talks about a lot in the book is, in a culture of entitlement, a lot of times what we do is we try to parent in a way that protects and shields from those hardships as much as possible. And in doing that, we send a very false message to our kids that they're entitled to easy lives. They're entitled to happiness and ease and comfort in all manner of things. But one of the things we know is that to nurture that gratefulness, we need to make room for some different things. So there's a great story that Kristen told in the book early on about her daughter, her oldest daughter, and their struggle with giving her room to have her own struggles and doubts. And so I just want to read this one section really quickly. She says, a couple of summers ago, Madison went on a local missions trip with her youth group. They spent 3 nights and 4 days serving lunch at a homeless shelter, stacking food at the Houston Food Bank, and volunteering at a daycare for low-income families. She returned, exhausted, dirty, and with a lot of questions that took us by surprise. My kids have seen a lot in their short years. We've exposed them to extreme poverty in other countries and in our own city. They've seen suffering and understand in their core that life can be very unfair. As I listened to Madison wrestle with questions that I have also asked myself, why does God allow this? What if he doesn't still speak today? Is it okay if I don't want to be a missionary? I tried to help by telling her what I believed. But Terrell, who's her husband, cautioned me that while it was uncomfortable to hear our firstborn ask hard questions, they weren't mine to answer. I knew in my heart we had to let her figure them out for herself. It was tempting to tell her what to think and what to believe just because it's what her dad and I believe. But I knew if we allowed her to struggle with her questions and gave her freedom to ask them, she would become stronger in her beliefs in the end. And I resonated with that story because I think that we do want to answer things for our kids, and we do want to make it easier, but we all know that in our own lives, a lot of the things we learned that stuck were things that we had to learn on our own, and we had to learn through our struggles. And the other thing that Kristen said was that God often uses mistakes, wayward choices, and brokenness to bring redemption. So let me throw this out there, and this is kind of a bigger question to jump into, but how has this been true already for you, maybe personally, or also in your families? How has God used the struggle moments to be some of the greatest moments of redemption and opportunity?
I don't know that I've seen it as much with my children yet. You know, they're fairly young still, so we haven't really faced the challenges of friendships or struggles in that way. Braylon, my 6-year-old, he's terrible to say, but he's a quitter. Like, he's very quick to, if something gets hard, he's out. He's like, I don't want to do it, don't want anything to do with it, I don't want to try anymore, like, I don't want to learn to ride my bike, it's too hard. So trying to instill that in him, of being, of persevering, I'm not real sure how to do that, because I feel like that's just part of kind of built into him right now. So pushing through that is really hard for us, to not come down hard on him and understanding that that's just kind of a natural part of who he is, but instilling in him courage. So I have no correct answer, sorry, for him. But for us, I mean, there's been several points in our lives, just from we've moved a lot. Starting over in a new town is difficult, and you definitely have to kind of keep pushing through, and it's difficult making friendships and finding churches and jobs, and it's definitely, you find disappointments in that, because life's not always easy. But I feel like, I hope that that will help with our children in the future too, that they will see what we've done as a family unit and staying strong together has helped us, you know, to keep going even when it is hard not having family nearby. You know, because life is just hard and you have to keep going even when dad's out of town working and mom's by herself, or, you know, mom's out of town and dad's by himself, whatever the case may be. You know, not having that backup has been tough for us.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's right on point. Is how do we fight through in those moments? And that's back to that grit word that we were talking about earlier. How do we teach our kids grit? But I think we'd all say that part of that grit process is giving them room to not be good at something. So what about some of the rest of you? How has it been true that moments of struggle have actually led to some breakthroughs, either for you personally or in your family?
Well, our kids are little too, so I don't know if they have really had a lot of those experiences themselves. But after we had our first kid, who's almost 5.5-ish now, we had secondary infertility. So we adopted our second kid, and so he was adopted from California, and his birth family is obviously very poor. And his birth brothers we had the chance to meet, and Lucas, our older son, has met his little brother's birth brothers, and they don't have really a house, and they literally had no toys. And so we, you know, our lifestyle here is pretty comfortable, and our son will sort of use, you know, oh, well, my friend has all of these other toys that you haven't gotten me yet, you know, and I want this because so-and-so has it, and all of he's just surrounded by other kids who are just as entitled as he is, or more entitled. And so we've tried to leverage knowing Nicholas's birth family and knowing the circumstances that they live in without objectifying them, but that they didn't have any balls. So we bought some balls and we gave them to them, and we left them with the birth brothers, because we have balls back home and we don't need to take balls home, and they don't have any balls, you know. And we really have tried to leverage that when we can, that they don't really have a house and that they don't really have a safe place to live. And it's just sort of a work in progress of how to sort of talk about it. But when he asks questions, we try to be really truthful and use them as an example. And you know, it comes up to about, you know, just our struggle with not being successful with having another baby. And now that's over because now I am pregnant. But we tried to talk really openly with him about that, so that he would see that there's a lot of ways to sort of have a strong family, or maybe not just everything's the same way that all of his friends have things.
I think that's a great example, and I think that even, you know, falls in line with Kristen's example of, you know, the reason that her daughter Madison even got to some of her questions was they exposed her to different places in the world and different environments and people who have less than what a lot of us do. And I think when we do that, we start to break through the entitlement, but we do also put our kids in a position where we introduce questions, and we even make room for some of the doubt and the uncertainty. And, you know, I think for a lot of us on this chat, you know, some of our kids are younger. Maybe they're not asking all the questions yet, but, you know, I definitely anticipate some of the questions they're going to ask someday, because they're the same questions I asked of, well, why do I have these things and other people don't? Why was I born in the United States and in, you know, in a family that had these things and somebody else wasn't? And I think the easiest thing we can do sometimes is want to rush to quick answers. And where she goes in the book that was a challenge to me was, how do we not rush to the answers but create space in our homes for our kids to wrestle with those things, so that ultimately they, if they figure it out for themselves, again, I guess the parenting thing we all skip through, if they figure it out for themselves, they're probably going to believe it a lot quicker than if we just tell them that, you know, that you have more and that the gifts we have are meant to be shared. So that's a great example. Let's talk a little bit, though, about where is the balance. And Laura, this goes back to something that you even said last week. You called out the fact that she said in the book about how all our kids are really entitled to is their parents' love, and you added safety. And I think we'd all agree with you that as parents, it's our job to make sure our kids, you know, are as safe as we can make them, and that we're not putting them in dangerous places. But I also think that introduces the conversation of, where is the balance between introducing our kids to hard life experiences and then also keeping them safe. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do we walk that fine line between exposing our kids and protecting our kids?
I'll start this one because it'll go in line a little bit with what we were just talking about. So I was thinking about an example. It may not be so much safety and exposing them to harmful things as much as just allowing our kids to be exposed to what I'll generically refer to as the world, right? So I think biblically we're called to be the salt and the light, and it's really hard to be the salt and the light if you're sitting in a pool of light, or if you're sitting with all salt. Like, at some point you have to go be part of the world to be part of salt and light. And I think that's a really important thing. So to me, that means that we have to, at some point, your kids have to learn to and realize there's a world out there, and exposure becomes part of what you do. So the time and the place become really important. But I think that there's also opportunities where your kids are going to watch the world happen around them and even see you as a parent interact with the world, and it's going to be eye-opening for them. So I'll offer an example. I shared previously, I have a 12-year-old daughter, so we are doing that whole preteen, some kids are already allowed to, quote, date, you know, use of phones, use of internet, what movies we watch. We are in the thick of that exciting part of parenting. And a couple weeks ago, there were text streams, so she's allowed to use texting to contacts that are approved. She can't add contacts on her own, and I read all texts. So that's an exciting part of my week when I sit down and read all the texts. A couple weeks ago, we had a very elongated conversation because I was not happy with the context of a text stream in which she was participating. While she was not saying the words or the things that were most concerning, she was still a participant in the conversation and party to it. So we had a really long talk about how God calls us to be a witness and an example, and by allowing something to happen around us, that's as much as agreeing with it. Some of those kinds of examples about what you can be a part of. Fast forward 2 days, we host a friend's 40th birthday party at our home. So people are here some people we didn't even know that were invited to this party were here very late into the evening, including being out on our deck into very late hours of the night while my kids were, quote, sleeping upstairs in their bedrooms with their windows open. And the next morning, Liza Jane wanted to know why it wasn't okay for her to be in conversations on text where words and phrases were being used that were okay, but I had people on our deck that were saying those things or similar type things. So, as a parent, I wanted to go, oh my gosh, I screwed up, and maybe I did a little. I'm not trying to say that that should be, but it opened the door for an incredible amount of conversation in our house about the salt and light concept. I talked directly about the fact that one of those people sitting there is someone who I pray for every day that they will meet Jesus, and that I'm one of the people that helps them get them there. And I know that means there's going to be times when they're going to say and do things around me that I don't like, but I got to be around them if I'm going to introduce them to Jesus, and they're going to see it one way or another, right? So really rich conversation. Did I want to necessarily, do I want my kids to be exposed to people using unsavory language? On my back porch? No. Should I, as a parent, maybe have been a little bit smarter about the fact that my kids were upstairs with windows open? Maybe. On the other hand, great conversation and a learning opportunity, and an opportunity for me to tell her, listen, when I was 12 years old, I couldn't be in conversations like that either, because at some point you're at a formative stage in life, and you have to learn where the boundaries are and where to say no and how to be a witness, and that's where you are right now, Liza Jane. But someday you're going to get to be the person that's on the back porch, and you're going to be there representing Jesus and being the Jesus in that dirty, filthy spot, whatever that is at the moment, and I want you to be ready to handle it and be strong and firm in what you believe. So that was a really long answer, I'm sorry, but I think the point is, like, I think you have to allow kids, whether it's exposure to an experience, I don't know that you want to expose them to a hot stove on purpose, right? But exposing them to some things, planned or unplanned, I think at some point has to be part of the process. I'd recommend you do it on purpose instead of accidentally like I did the other week. But I think the point stands that some of the best learning lessons come from them seeing and hearing the things that maybe you don't really want them to see or hear. You can take that to an extreme. Don't judge me.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I can build on that. You touched, Laura, on a lot of the things I was thinking with your example. But what I was thinking as we were going through that was we talked about how do we teach our kids to take risks, to develop thought for themselves, and I was thinking about the idea of them being safe. And I think that just like with physical safety, you know, if my son wants to jump off the couch, I'm probably going to let him do that. And if he scuffs a knee or gets a boo-boo, he's going to learn. If my son wants to jump off the roof, I'm going to step in as a parent and stop it. And I think probably the same is true for emotional safety and spiritual safety. If our kids are doing things like Laura just explained, that are safe but maybe risky spiritual things, or safe but risky emotional journeys in life that we think they can learn from, we as a parent have the right to allow that to happen, but we also have the right to step in, or the responsibility to step in, if these emotional or spiritual safety issues are going too far, just like we would with physical safety. And I don't have a great example of that, but I think we try to do that as parents, and we've let Lucas explore topics. And the other thought I had, and then I'll mute my mic again and be quiet and listen to others, but the other thought I had was that as a parent of a transitioning from toddler to kind of elementary school kid, I've learned that his thought process and how he processes things he experiences isn't always linear. And he'll pull stuff out of the middle of the air at a time that we're not expecting and talk about something that happened weeks or months ago. So I've learned as a parent to be ready for it whenever it happens, and that I don't necessarily have to push the issue right when it happens.
I think that's a great example, and I think this is a great piece of the conversation that she goes to several different times in the book. One of the examples that she uses as well that is right along what y'all are talking about is with the books that we let our kids read. You know, I think we're constantly wanting to push that developmental edge of what are they ready to read yet, but we also have to be aware of what conversations do we need to be really close to, because we are introducing them to concepts that are beyond. I think just to be super practical, one of the illustrations that she used in the book was when her teenage daughter wanted to read The Fault in Our Stars. When The Fault in Our Stars came out the other year, if anyone who had a teenager, that was the big thing, and then the movie came out and everything else, and she said, you know, part of her, it fell into the radar of, I know that there's sex and there's these other things, you know, should my young teenage daughter be reading this? This glorifies maybe that kind of relationship. But on the other hand, she said the part of her brain that went out was the part that said at some point, I've got to expose her to these pieces of the world in a way that's going to introduce conversation. And so she did allow her teenage daughter to read the book, and she also read the book and told her daughter up front that if she was going to read it, they were going to talk about it together when she was finished reading it. And so, again, you know, creating those, I guess, our our role as parents, are we creating the guardrails, but also giving them room in between those guardrails and moving them at the appropriate moments. And I think we're all figuring that out a little bit. Let's talk. I want to stay on here just maybe another minute or two and dig a little bit into the failure piece, because especially as we talk about living in an entitled culture, I think the classic example everyone goes to is that we live in a day and age where everyone gets a trophy for everything. And that just creates an entitlement mentality because everybody thinks they should get to win. And one of the things that I loved that she said in the book is that I want my son to lose as many soccer games as possible when he's 6, because if he doesn't lose when he's 6, it's going to be a lot harder to lose when he's in college and he's looking for somebody to hand him a trophy and pick him back up off of the floor. And so I thought that was great, and I think a lot of us tend to champion that mentality of, okay, let's stop giving trophies. And yet I will be the first one on this feed to acknowledge that my son has played 5 seasons of soccer so far. 3 of the seasons, they got medals at the end of the season. They didn't keep score at a single game, so I don't know what the medal was for other than, yay, you played soccer. And the last 2 seasons, as they've gotten older, all the parents were asked to chip in $5 toward the end of the season so they could get trophies to hand out at the last game. And so, we, along with everyone else, went, okay, here's our $5, hand our kid a trophy, even though we rail against that. And so, anyway, introducing that whole conversation of when and how do we need to let our kids fail seems extreme, especially in the soccer example. Losing a game isn't failing so much, but when and how do we open the doors for failure, knowing that if we don't want to raise entitled kids but grateful kids, they've got to learn to fail now because they will fail later, and we need them to be ready for it. So talk about that a little bit. Give me some examples. How can we let our kids fail?
I think I have a small example of this from today, actually, and it's not so much a failure, but just learning to take responsibility for their actions, whatever they may be. And this week, Jana has come home from school and been very back and forth about whether she has done her homework or not, and the days that it's done. She's got end of the school year, laziness, I guess, but some of the days, even if it's done, it's just not her best work, and she knows it, I know it. All I have to do is point to one sentence and she knows exactly what's wrong with it and what she needs to do, and then she grumbles and mumbles about fixing it and everything. But yesterday she told me that she didn't have homework. She had finished it on the bus and only had this one little piece of homework, and she had done it, and she kind of pitched a fit about me checking it and nagging her and all this stuff. So I said, okay, fine. If it's not finished, then I guess we'll find out. And sorry. And I feel like, she's only in 1st grade, and there isn't a whole lot of accountability on the homework front or anything yet, but, there will be. And so we had a whole conversation about, I wasn't going to be on top of her about everything, and, she needed to be able to take responsibility about whether she did it correctly and to her best ability and everything. And I kind of feel like that'll play into the whole failure thing later on, because they've got to learn to be able to fail gracefully, I guess, but also, for these minor failures to accept that it happened and kind of move on and go upward with it, so that way they learn something from it so it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. And I think that's a great example. Schoolwork, I think, is definitely one of those out there. I want my kids to get good grades. And, in part, I think, our kids come home with report cards, and we feel in some ways like we're being graded. And I know it's hard not to get that report card and go, oh, how am I doing? And, but there's a reality to the fact that we have to let them be in that space. And as they get older, I think homework's a great example of they have to own the fact that if they didn't do it, there's consequences for that. And, that they're going to have to figure out and know themselves, did I do it? Did I not do it? And does it matter to me that I did it versus am I just making mom or dad happy by getting that one checked off the list? I know for me, an example, not in parenting, but in being a kid, I remember in elementary school, I had a horrible habit of forgetting my lunch money. And my parents kept it in an envelope or a jar. Laura, I don't remember exactly what they used all the time, but it was always right inside our one cabinet, and we could grab our lunch money on the way out the door. And I just was always forgetting it. And there was a period of time where, we lived right on the same street as the elementary school that I was attending. And there was a default because I knew I could call my dad, whose office was right down the street, and he would run lunch money down to the school. And I remember the day that he finally got tired of correcting something that I hadn't corrected on my own, and he said no. And I was in a horribly embarrassing situation where I had to go into the school nurse's office because I knew her and ask if she would lend me lunch money. And I was completely mortified and couldn't believe that I had to do that. And of course she did lend me the money, but my dad did not want the lesson to be lost. And so not only did he give me the money to then, the next day, the money to take down to her, but he came along with me and made sure that I went in and thanked her for bailing me out and let me have that conversation with her. And I was mortified at the time, and yet here I am at the age that I am, and I remember that story, and I'm also pretty certain that I remembered my lunch money the rest of the year. So anyway, just a little example, I think, of what does it look like to create space for failure. So what else? Are there other hard life experiences that we feel like are good opportunities that we want our kids to have? That might have been a weird way to ask that question. Let me transition to this last piece that I want to talk about because we're almost out of time tonight. The time went really, really quickly. One of the things that she talks about in the book is that we do live in a mentality where we want everyone to believe that they're special. And as parents, one of the things that we find ourselves saying to our kids, whether we mean to us, you're special, you're special. And I do believe that kids are special. In fact, I believe that they are some of the very best gifts that God gives to us. And so as parents, when we're grateful for that, it's hard not to look at our own kids and think, dang it, you're special. You're mine, and you are a beautiful, beautiful thing. But she makes a distinction in the book that I want to throw out to y'all briefly of what is the difference between telling our kids they're special, which sometimes leads to an entitlement, I deserve things because I am special, versus telling them God made you unique. What's the difference? How do y'all read that difference?
I'm not sure that I know exactly how to teach my children the difference in that, but I teach preschool, and I teach 3-year-olds, and so we have 2 different classes of 10 kids each, so 20 kids a week ultimately is what I'm dealing with. And it's very interesting to see a very clear division of the children who know the difference. These are kids who are going to a private preschool. They're affluent enough to be able to pay for preschool, which is clearly not necessary in the first place. So, children that are well cared for, children that are loved, children that are in good homes, but then there are those that the line is very much crossed, and it hits early in the school year when they're so already at 3 very entitled that no, you're going to do this for me, and I get to go first, and I get everything I want, and if I don't, I will pitch a fit, and you will make me the fish feeder today because I want it, and my mama said I can. So it's unique to see that experience with different children from different homes, and then to see the interaction with the parent in the classroom when they do drop off or when they do pick up, and the way the parent doesn't just, oh, I love you, it's so good to see you, or have a great day, sweetie, when they drop off. It's the anything you need, let me help you wash your hands, let me hang your backpack up for you even though your teacher says you can do it, but I'm going to do it for you because you're pitching a fit. Or you are not getting in the car seat because, I'm telling you to, and the teacher's standing there because you're pitching a fit that I won't hand you your lollipop yet. So it's really interesting to see that breakdown with different families in that way, kind of viewing it from the outside in. That being said, not that my children don't ever do any of those things, but seeing it from that perspective makes me a little bit more aware to hopefully make sure I don't set my children up for those situations that they can't get along with others or get along in an environment without me present, to make them think that everyone needs to dote on them and make them that apple of their eye everywhere else. Yes, they are to us, but the rest of the world is not going to view them that way, and that's a hard lesson.
Yeah, that's a great illustration, and she talks in the book, she does a whole chapter. If you haven't read the book, I do really want to encourage you to pick up the book if you're tuning in and this is a conversation you're having in your home. She goes to some really practical places in the book, and she does talk about that idea of a child-centered home. And when we tell our kids they're special and we make them the center of everything, we do give them a false sense of what's their role in the world and as part of a larger body. And so when they understand that they're unique, they know that they have a role to bring to the body versus being the center of everything the body is supposed to serve. And I thought that was, again, very convicting. It's hard to not tell our kids they're special, and it's hard not to make them the center of our homes. And I do want to end here, and I know it's a little bit crazy because this has been a conversation in parenting, but one of the big things that she says in terms of parenting well, and especially not creating that child-centered home where instead we're effectively telling them that God made them unique and they're part of something bigger than themselves, but she focuses on the relationships with parents themselves, and talks about the relationships between husbands and wives and being able to focus on that and letting your kids see that as a priority so that they know that they're not the center of the home. And I know for some of you turning in tonight that you're probably, some of you are single parents, and I think she talks even more too about the fact that we need friendships and people in our lives that are coming alongside us and being in our parenting community. That's part of even having these conversations, is knowing that we're part of a community, and collectively we are raising kids, and collectively we are all part of something that is so much bigger than any one of us. And so I didn't answer the question at the beginning because I'm controlling the conversation. And I think for me that's probably my answer to that underlying question of, what I want most for my kids. And what I want most for my kids is that I do want them to understand that they're part of the body of Christ, and that we come to that body as unique members who all have something to offer that God gave to us. One of the illustrations I've always loved best is that God didn't create any one of us as a finished drawing, but God created all of us and gave us our own set of crayons and wants to be part of drawing a masterpiece with us, and nobody's set of crayons is the same as somebody else's set of crayons. And so, but together when we use them, we create something really beautiful. And so the last question before we pray and sign off tonight is just in thinking about the big picture. If y'all had to answer the question, what is the end game in our parenting? And for those of you in this conversation, while you think about the answer to that, I want to read. This is from the very end of Kristen Welch's book, when she comes down to what is the end game, what is her dream for a grateful family. She shares, "I would love for my kids to say one day that they are grateful for their lives because their dad and I were grateful for ours. I want them to have memories of me thanking God for all He's done. I want them to catch me writing thank you notes and being generous with my time and money because God has been generous with me. But most of all, I want my children to know that we wanted them to resist the current of our culture and choose a lifestyle of gratitude because we love them deeply and completely." And so again, just creating that picture. And so let me just ask some of you tonight that have participated. I'm so grateful for your time and your insight, your willingness to share both our successes and not successes. I won't call them failures because we're over that, of parenting. But for any of you, if you had to put it in a couple words, what's the end game of parenting grateful kids?
I think we'll get to reap the rewards of having a strong relationship with our children as adults, which I think is valuable. And I'm not real sure, thinking through that, how do you get to that point that you can parent your children now while they're young and discipline them and love them, but giving them the freedoms as they grow and change to continue teaching them, but slowly building a different type of relationship with them. And I think if we can find that fine line now and start on that journey, then we will eventually be able to get to that point. And hopefully the end game will be that we have raised our children well and that we can be in relationship with them as adults in a healthy way.
That's great. Sorry, I'm moving around because my computer's about to die and I didn't have my cord in the right room. But I think that's great. What I caught from what you just said too was we want to raise kids that we want to be friends with as adults, and I think that's definitely a place we're heading. We want to raise people that that are grateful and that get it, and that we're gonna build the relationship that lasts. So I think that's right on par. Well, it is the end of our time, and I have really enjoyed these 2 hours that we've done. An hour last week and an hour tonight went by really quickly, and these are really big conversations. So again, I do want to encourage you to read the book. In the book by Kristen Welch, there are discussion questions in the back for each chapter. There's also practical ideas for whatever age your kids are and how to apply the things she talked about in that chapter. And so I know that I pastor a church where we say all the time that life is better together and that life is also better in circles than in rows. And so I want to encourage all of you who are asking that, who are out there tonight, to continue this conversation. Find a group of friends or one or two other people who maybe want to read the book with you and dig into each chapter and go through the questions that she asks. She goes just to a lot more places in that. But I'm just so grateful that we got to spend this time together. I'm grateful to know that we're not in it alone, and I'm grateful to know that God loves us through this whole parenting journey. And so as we end tonight, I want to invite y'all to pray with me. God, thank you so much that you are the perfect parent. Thank you that you love us so well and that you went so far for us in sending Jesus into this world. And God, our hope and our desire as parents is to be faithful to the call that you've placed on our lives to be parents, to see it every day, even in the midst of the challenges, as a gift and a privilege, to steward the hearts and the minds and the lives of these little people that you've put into our lives. And so, God, we give you thanks for our kids. We give you thanks for this journey. And God, I pray over each one of us tonight that we would know your presence in our homes, that we would feel your hand in our lives each and every day. Guide us, shape us, give us wisdom for every moment, every decision, every opportunity that we have with our kids and in our homes. And we ask all these things tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, thanks again. Stay tuned. We will be having more conversations like this in the weeks and the months to come. I'll talk to you all later.